Welcome to Doctrine Dive. Throughout the Bible, there have been accounts of idol worshipping. Idols were gods or images that people created and worshipped in place of the one true God. These idols were often linked to false beliefs and were condemned by God. The Bible mentions many idol gods from different cultures, showing the dangers and consequences of worshipping them. In this video, we will explore some of the most notable idol gods mentioned in the Bible, their significance, and how they were worshipped. 1. Baal. Baal was one of the most prominent gods in the Bible, worshipped by the Canaanites and various other ancient Near Eastern cultures. He was primarily seen as a fertility god associated with the rain, agriculture, and the vitality of crops and livestock. In many cultures, the fertility of the land was seen as a reflection of the god's favor, and Baal was thought to control this by sending rain and ensuring abundant harvests. The worship of Baal often involved rituals that included animal sacrifices, offerings, and sometimes more disturbing practices like temple prostitution. His followers believed that by engaging in these acts of devotion, they could secure the blessings of fertility and prosperity. However, the Bible repeatedly condemns the Israelites for falling into Baal worship, especially during the reigns of corrupt kings like Ahab and his wife Jezebel. One of the most striking confrontations between the worshippers of Baal and the prophet Elijah is found in 1 Kings 18. Elijah challenges 450 prophets of Baal to a contest on Mount Carmel to demonstrate who the true God is. When Baal's prophets fail to bring down fire from their altar, Elijah prays to God, who responds by sending fire from heaven to consume the sacrifice, proving that the God of Israel is the true and only God. 2. Asherah. Asherah was a goddess often linked to fertility, motherhood, and love. She was worshipped widely throughout the ancient Near East, and at times even the Israelites fell into the trap of honoring her alongside God. Asherah was commonly symbolized by a tree or a wooden pole, known as the Asherah pole, which was often placed in high places of worship. This idol was associated with the worship of nature and the life-giving forces of the earth, particularly the cycles of planting and harvesting. The worship of Asherah, like that of Baal, included rituals that were considered deeply immoral by biblical standards. These rituals often involved offering incense, sacrifices, and even engaging in acts of temple prostitution. Despite God's commands against idolatry, many of the kings of Israel and Judah set up Asherah poles in an attempt to appease the people who had grown fond of her worship. One of the most notable instances of Asherah worship in the Bible occurs in 1 Kings 14:23, where King Jeroboam of Israel builds shrines to Asherah, leading the people into sin. Ultimately, prophets like Elijah and kings like Josiah sought to destroy these poles and rid the land of such idolatry. 3. Molech. Molech was a god associated with the Ammonites, and his worship was particularly horrifying due to the practice of child sacrifice. Molech was depicted as a towering figure, often with the body of a man and the head of a bull. People believed that by offering their children to Molech, they could earn his favor and protection. The most extreme form of Molech worship involved placing children into a fiery furnace or onto the outstretched arms of a statue, where they would be burned alive. This practice was an abomination in the eyes of God, and the Bible repeatedly warns against it. In Leviticus 18:21, God commands the Israelites not to offer their children to Molech, warning that such a practice would defile the land. Despite these commands, some kings of Israel and Judah, like Ahaz and Manasseh, allowed or even participated in such practices. The prophet Jeremiah speaks out against the worship of Molech in Jeremiah 32:35, describing the great evil and defilement it brought upon the land. 4. Dagon. Dagon was the god of the Philistines, depicted either as a fish or as a man with the body of a fish. As a god of grain and fertility, Dagon was central to the Philistine culture, and temples were built in his honor. The Philistines believed that Dagon could bring them success in their agricultural endeavors and help them in war. One of the most significant interactions between Dagon and the God of Israel is recorded in 1 Samuel 5, when the Philistines capture the Ark of the Covenant. They place the Ark in the temple of Dagon as a sign of their victory over the Israelites. However, the next day the statue of Dagon has fallen face down before the Ark, and when it is set back up, it again falls, this time with its head and hands broken off. This event is a clear sign of God's power over the false gods of the Philistines. The Bible tells us that the Philistines, in response, were struck with plagues, demonstrating that Dagon was powerless against the true God of Israel. 5. Kemosh. Kemosh was the god of the Moabites, often associated with war and destruction. He was believed to help the Moabites in battle and bring them victory over their enemies. The worship of Kemosh was a significant part of Moabite culture, and like many other idol gods, it involved rituals that were designed to secure favor in battle or in times of distress. The most disturbing aspect of Kemosh worship was its connection to child sacrifice, similar to the practices of Molech worship. In 2 Kings 3:27, the king of Moab, facing defeat in battle, sacrifices his own son to Kemosh in a desperate attempt to turn the tide in his favor. This act of human sacrifice is condemned by the Bible, and it reflects the extreme lengths to which people would go in their worship of false gods. King Solomon also fell into idolatry and built high places for Kemosh, an act that led to the division of the kingdom after his reign. 6. The golden calf. The golden calf is one of the most famous idols in the Bible, created by the Israelites while Moses was on Mount Sinai receiving the 10 Commandments. As the people grew impatient and unsure of Moses' return, they demanded that Aaron make them an idol to worship. He complied and fashioned a golden calf, which the people then worshipped as their god who had brought them out of Egypt. The worship of the golden calf was a profound act of disobedience, as the Israelites were directly violating the commandments of God. In Exodus 32, Moses descends from the mountain to find the people dancing and offering sacrifices to the calf. In response, Moses breaks the tablets of the law, destroys the idol, and punishes those involved in the rebellion. This incident serves as a powerful lesson about the dangers of turning to idols in times of doubt and impatience. 7. The Queen of Heaven, Ishtar, Ashtoreth. The Queen of Heaven, also known as Ishtar or Ashtoreth, was a fertility goddess worshipped in various cultures around the ancient Near East. She was associated with love, beauty, and war, and was often depicted as a woman with symbols of fertility like flowers or fruit. Worship of the Queen of Heaven was widespread, and it was not uncommon for people to offer cakes, incense, and other gifts to her. The Bible speaks of the Queen of Heaven in the book of Jeremiah, where the people of Judah, in defiance of God, continue to offer sacrifices to her. In Jeremiah 44:17-19, the people argue that their offerings to the Queen of Heaven brought them prosperity and peace, but God condemns their actions, pointing out that their worship has led to their downfall and judgment. The people's refusal to repent and turn away from this idolatry is one of the key reasons for the destruction of Jerusalem. 8. Tammuz. Tammuz was a Mesopotamian god associated with the cycles of death and rebirth, often linked to the changing of the seasons. He was believed to die in the summer when the crops withered and then return to life in the fall, symbolizing the renewal of life. The worship of Tammuz involved mourning his death during the summer months, followed by celebrations of his rebirth as the harvest began. The prophet Ezekiel condemns the worship of Tammuz in Ezekiel 8:14, where he witnesses women weeping for Tammuz at the temple in Jerusalem. This act of idolatry is a sign of Israel's spiritual decline, as they worship false gods while neglecting the true God who has delivered them. 9. Baal-Zebub. Baal-Zebub, also known as Beelzebub, was a Philistine god associated with disease and pestilence. The name Baal-Zebub means Lord of the Flies, which reflects his supposed power over disease and decay. People sought his help when they were sick, or when there was an outbreak of illness. Baal-Zebub was thought to have the ability to heal or protect people from disease, which made him particularly appealing during times of sickness or plague. In the Bible, Baal-Zebub is mentioned in 2 Kings 1:2-3, when King Ahaziah of Israel, after falling through a lattice, sends messengers to consult Baal-Zebub about his recovery rather than seeking guidance from the God of Israel. The prophet Elijah, in response, delivers a message from God that Ahaziah will die because he turned to a false god instead of the true God. This act of seeking help from Baal-Zebub rather than from God highlights the danger of trusting in idols, especially when people refuse to turn to the living God. In conclusion, the idol gods mentioned in the Bible reflect the spiritual struggles of the people of Israel and the nations around them. These gods promised power, prosperity, and protection, but ultimately led their followers into deception and destruction. The Bible consistently teaches that idol worship is a serious offense against God, and that true peace and fulfillment can only be found in worshiping the one true God. These ancient idols may seem distant from us today, but the lesson remains. Putting anything before God, whether it be wealth, power, or even personal desires, leads to spiritual emptiness. The Bible calls believers to guard against idolatry and to seek the true living God above all else.